Hello guys, sorry if you can't hear me. I have to set my camera back a bit. I'll try turning the volume up. I recommend doing that on your thing too. Sorry it's been a while since we did movie theater reviews. It's kind of been tough and not a lot of great movies come out, and I will say this, I did see this movie and the next movie I'm going to talk about after this episode a week earlier, but it's just been so busy I haven't had time to set aside to do these reviews till now. But yeah, the first one I'm going to talk about in this one is Pet Sematary remake. It was released this year, 2019. It's rated R, no kids, definitely. And it's an hour 41 long. It has a 6.2 out of 10 on IMDb with about 13,000-ish user votes. It has 57% on Metacritic with about 42 critics. It stars Jason Clarke, who was in The Lawless, one of the supporting roles, but he's been in other stuff too. And Amy Sintez, I think how you pronounce her name, and she was in You're Next. It's directed by Kevin Koch and Dennis Wundinger, and they did the Holidays horror anthology movie. The movie itself has 58% on Rotten Tomatoes by critics, with about 208 critics, and it has 43% by audience, about 680 audience members. And the critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes is that Pet Sematary takes its source material in a few new different directions, but this remake feels like it's exhuming almost as often as it does a revival. I will say, I had high hopes of this movie when it first came out. It had high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes at first, like in the 80s, and it slowly dropped a tad, but I was like, okay, this looks good. Then it came out, and it was still fresh at 61 when I went to see it. I'm like, okay, and the audience rating was pretty low, like 48 at the time. Now it's 43 currently. And I'm like, okay, obviously something's different here. And I haven't made my feelings shy about the past, about my feelings about current horror movies. And this movie, I'm a little baffled, but my feelings for it are still strong overall. There's definitely some good elements to this movie. The acting, for example, is better than the original. I have seen the original, and I love the original. It is better, and I do like the changes they make. I'm not going to get into spoilers. A character that dies in the original in the story isn't the character in this version. It's a different character. And it makes sense for the change because the ability to bond and get to closer is better than the originals, but when it came time to make the shit happen, they kind of relied on cliches, because in the original it felt very horror movie-ish. It felt very in your face, edgy and brutal. This one just feels very watered down. It feels like they could have gone for brutalness, and they settled. This movie isn't very gory. I mean, granted, the first Pet Sematary, the original, wasn't super gory, but it still has some good 80s gore. This one barely has anything. The scares in this film mainly rely on jump scares. Now, granted, the jump scares aren't super bad in this movie. There's actually quite a few intense scenes, but the climax just ruins it, really, because the climax relies on an image of a stereotype that is used, an image stereotype in horror movies that's been used a lot lately, and I've grown very sick of it. The main villain character, horror character at the climax, the way they designed it, I have a huge problem with, because it's very reminiscent of all the other things they've done lately, and the way the character talks during it, the way the character acts is completely wrong in my opinion. What made the original climax so great was that the character that was resurrected, that character was still them. Just instead of being like normal, the character was killing people and not having a problem with it. They were still off, but it was still them, just a bit off, so it was kind of creepy and eerie. And this one, the character has none of that. The character doesn't act like anything the character was when they were alive. There's one great scene in it, probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, of the character acting out, doing something they did earlier, and the person who resurrected the character kind of confused, telling the character to stop, and the character kept going with their act, and it started getting more violent, throwing things around, and it led to a great acting outburst that I was really into, and I was like, okay, this is kind of getting good here. But the character that was resurrected never maintains that. The problem with the character is that the character doesn't act like who the character was before they were resurrected. They act like a completely different person. In fact, they act like a cliched, overly serious, scary horror villain of today's time that talks about you're gonna burn in hell, you're gonna rot, and all that bullshit. Carries a kitchen knife, how original, and a lot of stuff. Wears it just frustrated me because this movie, it's Pet Sematary. It's not just some cheap old horror movie. I mean, we started with such high marks. In fact, the original Rotten Tomatoes critics consensus before it went rotten was sometimes remade is better. Just that one line, that one sentence. And God, now the acting's alright. The story, it takes risks, but it doesn't execute it. And the scares in this film, there are some good ones, but it does use some jump scares, which I did not find scary at all. And the lighting in this film was awful. I mean, there was some scenes where I couldn't see a thing. And it was so back and forth. There were some scenes I could see fine. There's some scenes when it's like when you're outside at night, it's like too dark. Like I couldn't see a thing. The movie does have some atmosphere that it carried over from the original. The biggest problem with the movie really is, and that's the problem with the movie overall, it's just lack of character. The original movie, well, sure, it's not always well acted, and it can have a little bit of a cheese moment every now and then. It still had character, it still felt genuine, it felt real, and it felt chilling. By the end of it, it was chilling, and it made sense, and the meaning was met. And this one, early on, they talk about, death and all that. Actually, a bit more than they did the original, in my opinion, a bit more thorough. But in that degree, it was handled right. But in terms of the tone and the direction of it, I felt that it was still a bit off. I feel like this movie, if I rewatch it, I may feel a bit differently about it, maybe a bit more positive about it, but it's not a bad movie, but it just, as a movie about death, it's solid, but as a horror movie itself, it does fail. It has some creepy moments, it has some intense stuff, it's just the payoff just sucks. And, I mean, God, when they were killing a character, they cut away from the kill. It's a R-rated horror movie, and they cut away from the kill. And this movie doesn't even have a high body count. Why do that? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. The cliched horror character, the lack of the personality of the horror character that was so essential in the original, the cliched climax, the there's just a lot of for a movie that's trying to be different, they rely on a lot of cliches towards the end. And there wasn't a lot of, the original movie got pretty intense, and it does have some eerie, chilling, good horror moments. This movie doesn't have them. And sure, some stuff are a little intense, and there are a few ingredients that are done better, but they changed way too much. They took out a lot of the horror element of the original, and they try to make this more... I will say this movie is a bit more dialogue driven. I mean, the first one, the original didn't lack its dialogue, but this one just felt like they didn't want to show any horror elements at all. They wanted to just talk. I mean, and that's the problem. The dialogue really isn't the issue. But when the horror element doesn't compensate for that, you don't see the gory, eerie chillingness of it all. It doesn't really help it all that much as a horror movie, especially an R-rated horror movie. Overall, would I recommend seeing this? I say give it a shot. You may like it. It does have some good elements in it. And what the movie had me for the most part, up until the characters, one of the characters' deaths. And more specifically the resurrected part, and it had me a little, but once the horror character that was resurrected started doing their thing, that's when the movie started to suck. And that's when the movie, when it should have gone for the gold, it didn't even place. And for a movie like Pet Sematary, that had an awesome climax, very intense and chilling, and plus the atmosphere in the original is much better. The second one, it had its moments, had certain scenes that definitely could have delivered some atmosphere, but and it had atmospheric moments, but when half the scenes are too dark to see anything, it's just kind of hard to get into. And yeah, certain elements of the storytelling are not done nearly as well as they did in the original. Certain characters aren't there. Certain characters should be there but aren't. There's a subplot in the original. I will say this, the acting in the dialogue in terms of talking about death and what it means and how it means to different people, I do like it a bit more in this one than the original. It is talked about more thorough out, and it is talked about with a bit better depth, but there's still a lack of character and personality at the end of the day. It just feels too monotone. The original really didn't have that, even though there are some moments of lack of acting. I think I'd be around on this movie long enough. Overall, it's okay. I feel like after watching the original compared to the remake, I can safely say the original's better in my opinion. Yeah, when it comes to like talking about the death part, it is handled better in the remake. But when it comes to the horror part, the part that really supposed to nail home the messages and really the flow of the story and how it's supposed to, what it means, the original did it better. I mean, sure, the dialogue and the acting, sure, it may not always be consistent, but on a visual scale, when it came down to it, when the shit came to shit, the original delivered and the remake really didn't, for me. At least at this moment. But I'd check it out. If you really want to see it, like you're just starving for some Stephen King action, it's fine to see in theaters. I recommend waiting till it's on pay-per-view or on DVD to see it, in all honesty, or streaming even. But yeah guys, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the videos, and have a good day.